Okay, so for this week for social studies, we're just gonna bump into, chapter 6, and take a look at that a little bit. I will, so the midterm lesson plans you guys turn in, grades are due on Wednesday, so, I'm not sure if I'll get to them all by the time that midterm grades are due. So it may or may not be on your midterm grade, but it will be on your grade. So, yeah, any questions on that or it needs help on it, it's let me know, but chapter 6, we'll review that today. So the next couple of weeks, we gonna just use, taking a look at some strategies and topics and ideas in terms of how to touch base on those or teach some of those topics and content. So chapter 6 talks about civic and global education. So as we look at that, in terms of your thoughts or opinions, civic education and global education, what do you think of when you hear those terms? It's the same thing, different.
I got enough. I don't remember a single thing from my civics class in high school. Not mentioned.
Yeah, that's okay.
And I feel like it was a waste of a class.
So civic education is kind of about like, how do you teach kids how to be like a citizen or right or involved in things happening in their school, community, their country, nations, on that. It could be something around voting, it could be something around activism, it could be something around solving problems, those types of things.
I feel like it was more of an extra history class.
Sure, yeah.
Than, anything about what I could do.
Sure, yeah.
As a citizen, it's like, oh, how
Right.
That's great.
Yeah.
But I feel like there should be more to it.
Yeah.
That would be not touched on.
I think a lot of times civic stuff kind of goes around that voting piece, or the government piece in terms of being involved in government or city government, national government, tribal government, et cetera, those things. Seems like that might be a more accepted or normal path, especially when you get a little bit older. Stuff that's an easy way to do the civics and of that. One thing you can take a look at that's involved with civics that there's a ton of stuff right now going on current events and controversial issues in regards to civics component. Right? So what happened yesterday in lots of cities around the United States can come by that you guys saw, right? The No Kings rally, right? Protests, and yeah.
I saw protests in Spain.
Oh, you did?
Portugal, and UK on my TikTok.
Yeah, I did not realize that, so, yeah, so some things like that, could be something, if you just sort of want to talk about them in class, but that's an example of like, advocacy or making people aware, so that could be connected to the global education piece of it, right? Global education, anything come fine when you talk about here the term global education? You think of it?
I think today it would be a lot of discussion about conflict.
Sure, yeah, it's a lot of that.
Because so much crazy stuff.
Right. So definitely global education is obviously more about like what's going on outside of the United States. Sometimes people might get that mixed up with multicultural education. But there is a difference between the two, like multicultural can go outside the United States, but we can also use that inside the United States as well, because there's great diversity amongst us here in our area and even in the United States. When we're talking about global education, that would be things what we're looking at in different countries and what's going on, like in the country, what's it like in terms of not just like people, but like the country and all kinds of things like that. So if we're talking about elementary, it gets maybe sometimes a little bit, I don't want to say difficult, but you have to look at it a little bit differently than talking about high school or middle school. And sometimes that world history piece comes into global education. And then you could go back into the olden days, which sometimes for kids gets a little bit boring, maybe. On that, talking about Renaissance and all that different stuff. But with our younger kids, we can just touch base or give you simulations. We can use things online in terms of like showing them a little bit about. And so current events gives us an opportunity to connect, what's happening in the country with that country, what it looks like, why is that happening, so it looks different. So, it's they're a little bit separate, but they can also be connected, quite easily in terms of civics, current events, and then also connecting to different countries, even if you just follow along, like where's the president going? It's not the US president, what the president went to Russia for something, or Ireland, different. And the United Nations, instead of helping them kids follow along what that stuff looks like. So lots of different ways that we can connect or talk about civic education and expand beyond just that voting and then be part of the government piece of that. So Glenn has some experience, right? Or not a good experience, but it might help us to call, remember what maybe not to do with those things. So throughout the book here talks about some different topics or ideas in regards to civic education, but I've got some activities we're going to do here, some different things that you can do in your classroom. We'll try to do those here together to hopefully maybe spark a little interest or some ideas in terms of what you could do potentially in your classroom. So just touching base a little bit here on the textbook. There's a couple of, yeah, it's all we will need these. So of course, there's all kinds of stuff online that a person can find too in terms of activities and events. I was searching through the National Council for Social Studies, just looking at different things. Then of course now in my Facebook feed and stuff, there's all kinds of stuff for a conference on the National Council of Social Studies in Washington, DC, that's coming up next month. So anyway, this website here has different activities, or there's all kinds of stuff on it, but talks about fostering some civic engagement components here. This is where I pull some ideas off of to be able to do things in your classroom. So talking about democracy in your classroom, good citizenship at school, and then solutions for the community. So the first one I think might be something that maybe you've seen before or talked about before, but it's called democracy in the classroom. Any ideas on how you can promote democracy in the classroom? Or what is democracy? What's included in democracy?
Class officers.
Okay, right. So how do they figure out class officers? What happens? Somebody say, I want to be the president, and that's it, or normally, or what do we do for that person?
Oh,
Okay, so voting, right? So that's a big piece of democracy is the voting. So going back to the voting idea, right, that's one way to do it. So an example that they give here in terms of promoting democracy or maybe even some of that voting is what are some rules in your classroom that you might have as a teacher that students might want to adapt or change or want to add into the classroom. And so how can you go about including that democracy piece to show show civics, right, and the component of that in your classroom, right? So here it goes through an idea, in terms of creating that on the back. It gives us, a way or an example of putting that to work in your classroom, okay? So let's kind of pretend or think of, a classroom that you guys potentially at a grade level, right? What is it, or what might be a problem in your classroom, or what is a problem you have seen when you're observing in other classrooms that you might potentially want to address? Think of it. Anything with the behavior of students or the procedures in a classroom, processes.
6, 7.
Okay, so a problem in, and I agree with you, because I help coach across country, I have a bunch of middle school kids that are constantly saying that.
My son.
My wife sent me a TikTok reel of a costume, that this person, I don't know if it's a teacher, that's gonna dress up. They have a red shirt on that's got a 7 on it, and then they have like a, I don't know if you sometimes see those, like an ice bag or a water bag that you, if you feel like sick. So they dressed up as a sick 7. On that, so, anyway, yeah. So. The problem we have is that too many kids are using the term 6, 7, right? So that's what you, that'd be great. Okay.
And it's not like. The fact that they use it, but. Once they start, they don't stop. They write it all over the paper and all over their papers and how they're told.
Okay, so. As a class, right, we would work with them to try to come up with and solve that problem, right? So let's think of, the next thing is create a rule that helps solve the problem. What's a rule that we can put together? That would potentially solve that. Can you think of that? Well, that we might be able to come up.
Then, all right. The. Parade. Only once per day.
Okay. Hold on. Microsoft. Because one of the things in terms of when you're creating, especially with students, and they offer a solution, they offer a sentence or whatever to complete that, is that you want to make sure it makes sense, right? So say that again, just to students.
Permitted to use the phrase or write the phrase once per day. I feel like that is. And then you try to like abolish it and
Right,
that never goes over.
yeah.
Well.
Yeah.
You know, but you're gonna use it. You know, make sure the timing is perfect.
Right.
So you can really enjoy the whole event.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Okay, so put that out there, right, for, and as a potential rule. So as we look at it, students are only permitted to use or write the phrase 6, 7 once per day. Okay. So now the next thing to do maybe is ask for clarification, right? So what I might ask is what happens if the student uses it more than once? Is there a consequence for it?
I'm a little old school. I wrote the sentences.
Sure, write sentences or.
You're going to write 6, 7 until you get right 6, 7 and 8.
So one thing always, of course, when you're creating rules, right, is that if you're gonna work with the students in a democracy piece that you talk about, maybe the consequences, right, on that. Obviously, you as the teacher have control of all your classroom rules, all your consequences, all those different components, right? So. You don't just say, the kids come up, with, oh, nothing, we'll just keep saying, yeah, I mean, obviously, we know that we have input on that, we have time to say. So, but if they help with some of those consequences, right, or maybe you have regular classroom rules. And those fall within there, and there's a progression of consequences, right, whether it's, first one is a verbal reprimand, verbal warning, second is recess time, third is blah, 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 maybe it falls. And so one thing also that, again, depending upon the age of your students, they're not always with you every day, right? So they probably have recess and they're staying 50 times to get out of their systems to get it done, come back in the classroom. So some of those things will be there, so which is fine, right? So the other thing to do is have students vote on it. So take that practice voting, and they help to create something they're gonna vote on, and so. Maybe they don't want this, and nobody agrees, they all want to say it all day long. So if you vote on this and majority of the students do not vote for it. Then what's the next step? Then what would you do? You could always say, I'm sorry, this is the way it is, and that's gonna be it, but if you're working through that democracy piece. What's something about this that we can potentially change? Anything up there, Steve? You were a kid, I really liked to say it, what might be something that you want to change.
Once before lunch and then once after.
Right, yeah, that'd be an easy one, right? Just once per day to 5 times a day, or 10 per day, or 3 per day, or like you said, one before lunch, one after lunch, et cetera, on that, so. So yeah, part of that democracy piece, right, is, and then this is something that you could just include in your classroom as something that happens, a little bit more regular, like if you're talking about classroom rules or things that are happening, or changes that you need to see in your procedures, different things like that, so. It's a process that's good to incorporate so that you're not just, this is not a specific class kind of thing that you're using, it's just something that is part of what you do in your classroom, and you can constantly teach you that civics piece. And again, I don't remember all the social studies standards, for North Dakota, so where that civics piece falls in there, what grades and also what level that is in depth, that you go to with that. Just a minute. Great thing. Okay, so the next one then is the citizenship, identifying good citizenship at school. It's interesting in this on this website here. This link here has responsibilities, rights and responsibilities of citizens. This is kind of interesting to me, and some of the things that they have here, so I just want to show you them here real quick. Responsibilities of citizenship. So. They got 11 things here, according to this website. This is not things that are like necessarily overly important, but kind of important based upon the people that they serve, right? So again, I don't know who they surveyed, what percentage of people they surveyed that were from different nationalities and stuff, but anyway, so the things that you look at here that would be maybe connected to schooling are, in my opinion, like very minimal, right? So again, voting in elections, that's a big thing that seems to go with like citizenship, is that a voting piece, right? So out of the people that they surveyed, 91% of people think it's important. But if you look at elections across the country, in terms of voter turnout, like if you get over 50% of the people to vote, that's like very good, like turnout for elections. So to me, that's like 91% say it's important, but yet you hardly have anybody that really votes regularly. So paying taxes, following law, serving on jury duty, that's one that you don't see very often. That takes place, maybe not so much out here in ruralness of where we live, bigger cities, yes, probably, but it just juries don't happen that often in communities. Respecting opinions of those who disagree, participate in the US Census, volunteer to help, know the Pledge of Allegiance, follow the habits of politics, protest if you think government accusations are wrong, display the American flag. So kind of interesting, protest if you think government actions are wrong. 82% of people they surveyed thought that was important. So there's some mixture of things here. I personally wouldn't say that, yes, all these are things that you teach or talk about in civics, but there's a fair number of them that you would younger kids, I probably wouldn't talk about the protesting thing. I talk about like, if you think something is wrong, what you can do to bring awareness to that. Protesting is fine, right? Following the rules, do it peacefully, and those different components. I should say necessarily peacefully, but you want to bring attention to the wrong one way or another. So, displaying the American flag, again, there's schools have the American flag, right? But some schools have more than the American flag. And all our schools here on Standing Rock all displayed Standing Rock flag, as well. Whereas like schools that are not, like in Lowbridge, for example, they just have the American flag. They don't have the state of South Dakota flag. So, but most reservation schools often fly the Standing Rock flag, as well. So there's some different components there in regards to displaying different flags, countries. Here in Science and Technology Center, we have flags of all the tribal nations that are represented here at the college, as well. Some schools have that also. Which has flags of the tribal nations that are represented in schools. There, some schools do that, some schools don't. Anyway, so to go back to ideas, identify good citizenship at school. So some things you can do in your classroom. Interesting here. To begin with, you can obey the rules. So that term, yes, we want our students to follow the rules. I don't like that term obey. It's kind of submissive a little bit, which, I mean, yes, we definitely want students to follow the rules that we put together because it's for their safety, right? But if you go back to that decision-making piece, students think maybe that there's a rule that is maybe not fair or can be adjusted, allowing them to talk about it, it's kind of interesting, kind of important. A big thing that kids might talk about or that they complain about now would be like some schools don't allow backpacks, right? Or you have to have clear backpacks, no phones, phones in the pouches that lock and then you can't use them, et cetera, those things. So, kids probably mostly disagree with that, but it's a good opportunity to have a discussion about why do things and then kind of understand the perspective of where maybe the school is coming from, even in making that rule, together. Okay. So the rules, and that's one thing that you could talk about or making decisions in terms of classes and the school overall. So students getting involved in, for example, like student council. Right? If you have a student council at an elementary school. That would be an example of citizenship at school. Other things though that they talk about here are also like older students creating books, illustrated books for kindergartners so that they know like coming into a new school, what's happening, what's going to go on. People will do that at middle school, sometimes also with like 8th graders sharing information with 6th graders as they're transitioning to middle school to help them kind of understand what's happening. So thinking about on this last page here of this, it talks about ways to be a good citizen at school. What are some things that students can do at school to be a good citizen. Example, they gave you your stream classmates with respect. There are the things you can think of that you would want to have students do at school to be a good citizen or a good person. Sometimes to me, being a good citizen and being a good person are the same type of thing. But what things would you include there if you want to? Any ideas?
And the supplies. Like, especially the ones that, like, I have to go out and buy myself,
Mhm.
my classroom budget is still,
Yep,
like. I realize that these are yours, but they are for everyone.
Sure.
And they need to class the respectable amount of time.
sure. So yeah, treat materials and supplies for the classroom, right, appropriately. That's a good one. So something that I think of a lot too, that's happened a lot would be like, you buy pencils, buy pens for students to use, right? I did a lot of middle school stuff, so, I mean, you're not constantly watching them, but you got some. Take a pen, leave a pen, put it back, constantly, like. And I do too, I'll be somewhere and using somebody's pen, and I'm. In my car, like, oh, it's in my hand, sorry, whoops, you know, so it does happen, right, but they try to be conscious about it. The more that you. Talk about it, bring it up, you know, remind kids about it, that's a better opportunity for them to be a good citizen, a person. So that's not any different than going to the library and checking out a book or going somewhere and using some of that public space, public materials. So that's good. Other ones you can think of?
I had a very good rule in my class.
Yep.
Here, but. Rule was to treat sub 10 times better than treat me,
It's good.
because. I know you, and you know me. So like, if we have. You know, a sarcastic relationship, or you're having a bad day. I'm gonna come back to school the next day and I'm not already forgetting you.
Yeah,
But that person comes in. With a completely new. And. Uncertain situation. Don't ever make them into this logic and like crap.
yeah. Yeah, that's a good idea, good thought, because. Yeah, students sometimes on purpose can be difficult for subs, but then sometimes even not on purpose, just being. Cells or whatever can make it difficult, and it depends upon the person who's substituting as well. Somebody that's seasoned, able to handle things can make it happen. You have a brand new person or somebody that's not comfortable with an age of kids can really struggle with that, so definitely being that, including that in terms of treat that sub, or even the specialist teachers or custodians, I mean, all the different people that they would interact with as much on a day-to-day basis is definitely important. So when treating the adults, especially the sub, with respect and giving them some grace, understanding is important piece of that. So yeah, that's great. So all these, and the respect piece definitely comes into that in terms of being a good citizen person. For that, goes all the ways in putting that of being, having good citizenship at school. Good. The next one can maybe sometimes be, I don't know about maybe difficult, but talks about develop solutions for the community. And it could also be solutions for the school as well, right? So now again, it depends upon your community, where you teach at, right? Maybe you teach in one place and live in another, or the size of the community, the organization of the community. The examples it gives here is I don't know how accurate it is. I mean, it could work, I'm sure, but it talks about teacher, living somewhere and wanting to. A place where people like a community center basically, for that, right, which is a great idea, a place should have a community center. Together, do a variety of things, so here to talk about. a Place where they could take art classes, play sports, hold events, et cetera, on that, so. She saw that as a problem, she went forward to the community, to the city council maybe or something like that. Found an empty lot, said you should build this here. Other people did not want them to build a community center, they wanted apartments, so they wanted, something different, a parking lot, set it on that. So the process there that they, example they did, she went to the city council, they thought it was a good idea, it's to other people. People thought it would be too expensive, they ended up voting on it and said, yeah, we'll build this, we have money to build it. I don't know where that would actually really happen, or city, a bigger city maybe, but oh, yep, that's a good idea, let's build this here, blah, 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 blah. So, in terms of the idea behind that, things that we could do in our classroom for our students would be, what is a problem that you see maybe here at school or within the community, and that you might want to address? And so the example or what they have here for us to work on in terms of the classroom would be draw a picture for kids, and explain that picture of that problem within your community. Okay, the communities that you live in right now, is there a problem or an issue that you see that might be able to be addressed? I shouldn't say be addressed, but what's something in the community that you live in now that you say like, oh, I nice didn't have this or do that, for example? It comes to mind.
I think it's a safe spaces for young people.
I'd say that's a common issue or problem a lot amongst many communities, not just here in Standing Rock, but like smaller rural communities. Having a space that is not necessarily connected to the school, because a lot of times schools have that restriction on. You have to be an employee to be in there, you have to be supervised, X, Y, and Z, you know, for that, so it's a little bit difficult, so creating a safe space somehow. For activities definitely is an issue. So kids could draw something, you know, or draw gym, draw a building, kids playing, etc. And then writing something to explain that, right? So then the next step then is, how might they come up with a solution? Or a simple solution, just like build something and hire people to do that, right? That's not necessarily. Right, yeah, yeah. So, you know, one solution possibly, you know, would be, how do you, an existing space, an existing place, how do you get access to that existing area, right? So let's say it is a school, for example. What can community members do with the school? Can they make a partnership? Can they create something where you find volunteers for people to supervise that space? Without having to be a school employee, so that kids can be active, they can do well, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe it's starting a small little nonprofit or some kind of community organization with young kids in mind, youth in mind, to be able to be active. So the more organized you are, some of those things. Anyway, so working with kids to be involved in the community or solutions to the community, that's another part of that civic education, right? So democracy, being a good citizen, then being involved or engaged. Those are three big pieces of civic education that you can do in your classroom that doesn't necessarily require a textbook or a lot of lesson planning based on that aspect. And hopefully it's something that, you know, a person could do, or maybe some class could do kind of over time, right, to be able to do that. So sometimes these, like being involved in the community, that might be an advocacy piece, as well. It might be that your class writes a letter to the city council or tribal government explaining that, hey, this is a solution, this is an issue we see in our community. This is a possible solution. We'd like to see you address it in the local law. That's just another way simple way to bring awareness to a problem within communities. So yeah, those are just some examples, different things besides just voting and government involvement for civics that you could potentially do within the classroom. So, and we could expand that out as well to like global education, maybe talk about some things happening in different countries, as well, that might to what we're experiencing and talking about here as well. So, but I'm going to share this this website with you guys. It'll be at ISBC as well. Under that, under our weekly assignment pieces there, in case you have some interest in taking a look at that. So, questions or comments on any of the stuff from chat?